power to get access to the ultra rich. Now, I've done part 1 of the video where I've gone through laws 1 to 10, and if you have missed that, I'll put that down in the link down below in the description box. So for today's live, I'll be going through from laws 11 onwards. So today is part 2 of how to use 48 laws of power to get access to the ultra wealthy. Okay, so where I left off from law 11, make people dependent on you. So I actually said this before, that the people who get access or who get into networks of billionaires and multimillionaires are actually not the people who are always the academically smartest, but it's always the people who know how to use power and leverage and how to play the best game on the power landscape. So the people who understand power the most are the people who are able to get access to connections and to wealth. So law 11, making people dependent on you. Well, obviously, firstly, you got to know the value that you offer to someone and what is the perceived high value of that person that that person really needs. And you could become valuable by providing introductions, insights, and solutions to their problems, and not by asking for favors. And when you make someone dependent on you, that's when you have power over them because they need you. And there's a caveat to making introductions. So when it comes to making introductions, it's not a free-for-all thing. You want to do it with a lot of discernment. So yes, making introductions makes someone dependent on you because they need you for your introductions, but you don't want to make an introduction such that you become redundant in the equation. And that's when you lose your power. So when you make an introduction and someone gets to bypass you and they don't need you anymore, that's when you lose your power. So that goes against this law. So you always want to make people dependent on you based on the value that you offer them and them not being able to bypass you or to replace you. So you have to know what your differentiating factor is. And law number 12, using selective honesty to disarm and to win. So what does it mean by that? Using selective honesty, meaning that you don't overshare everything to the state of you being vulnerable to manipulation, but use selective honesty such that it's just enough for those touch points to build trust. But you don't have to sacrifice every personal detail in order for you to disarm them. So use selective honesty to disarm and to win. So strategic truth builds trust. You have to be very strategic in what parts of truth you want to tell. So there's no oversharing and just enough vulnerability to humanize you, because trust is also built through authenticity. So whatever parts that you want to share, it has to be honest, but then you could be very selective about what you want to share. And law number 13, appeal to self-interest. Well, obviously, when you want to ask for something, you don't just tell them why you need it. You always angle it from a point where you want to take or ask for something from them. Is angle it to a point of what they can get out of it as well. So that it seems like both parties are actually gaining something out of it instead of just you. So appeal to self-interest. So never just say like, can you help me on this? Like, it has to end something along the line of this actually aligns with what you really care about. And because power moves through incentives, it doesn't move through sympathy. So sympathy is a very weak play on power. And, sometimes I feel that society, it brainwashes or it conditions the masses on like sympathy, compassion. I think that these are very manipulative way to keep the masses in control. And when even my former boss actually said, hey, you're really Machiavellian and mercenary, like before he actually got to hire me. And then he actually said that, but I didn't fall for that because that's just a way to gaslight you when they want to get something out of you and you don't give it to them. Like they try to take advantage of you and you don't allow that to happen. So they say things like, oh, like words like you're crazy or like you're unhinged, you're Machiavellian, you're mercenary. All these are just words to try to bring you down so that they can take advantage of you, or so that they can shortchange you. And when you hear that, it means that you're actually going on the right track. That means that that person is unable to manipulate you. And guess what? Like, ironically, while he said that I'm Machiavellian and I'm mercenary, but then he doubled what I was asking for, like in terms of the 6-figure salary, like he doubled it, and he still hired me in the end. So what does this show? That showed that when he said that I was mercenary at the very beginning, he was just trying to try his way to try to shortchange me. But in the end, he actually relented because I held my stand, and also I had many of his competitors that were vying for me, so I had a lot of power. And that shows that when someone says that, when someone calls you like with a negative connotation, you have to think like, what's in it for that person to call you with a negative connotation, right? Especially crazy. I feel that the word crazy is also like a very misused term to try to gaslight and manipulate someone when they can't get something out of you. So anytime someone calls you crazy, you just think that you're actually winning. When they say you're Machiavellian, you're mercenary, you're actually winning. And then you want to be very careful when someone says like, oh, you're so kind and you're so nice. Like, then that goes the opposite. That means that that person is trying to manipulate you through the power of suggestion. Because by suggesting that you're so kind and you're so nice, that means that, you feel the need in order to live up to that. And that's when they get to take advantage of you. So when someone says that you're so kind and you're so nice, you have to think twice about that, what that really means, or do they really mean it? Because like I say, society created this word compassion. You see, even like the ultra wealthy who donate to charities, they don't always do that out of compassion. Like, they do it out of their own self-interest because they get to save money on taxes. So yeah, on facade, it plays into the whole society brainwashing of compassion. And that's not to say to dehumanize you, but you really want to think of when someone uses the concept of compassion, whether it really means compassion or if it means something else to manipulate you. So where was I? I was at appeal to self-interest, right? Yeah, I was at appeal to self-interest. Okay, and so now the next one that I want to talk about is, there was law number 13, appeal to self-interest. Okay, I did talk about how someone can actually gaslight you, and if you're not confident enough and you fall for it, then that's when you're very vulnerable to being taken advantage of. And so now law number 14, pose as a friend and work as a spy. So observe who speaks last and who decides and who influences. So pose as a friend. Well, obviously, if you're in the corporate world, you do know that your colleagues are never your friends. And most of the time, people are posing as a friend, but they're working as a spy because they want your secrets, they want competitors' secrets. And so this law goes both ways. You have to be very cautious of who is posing as a friend and is actually being a spy. And you yourself want to pose as a friend and work as a spy, especially in the power landscape. And you want to be very careful who you trust. So I've said before, like, friends are only people who have already earned your trust through trials and tribulations. And when you pose, and so those people, they are allowed to be within your circle. And when you pose as a friend, you also have to earn someone's trust. So it goes both ways. And so you have to really see when you use this law, whether you are in a circle of trust. And if you're not in a circle of trust, you're just in a power landscape, then you really want to pose as a friend and work as a spy. So this only applies to being outside of trusted circles. Of course, like for friends who have already proven their trust, you don't have to work as a spy. But I did talk in my previous video about who gets to earn trust. So now law number 15, crush your enemy totally. So crushing your enemy totally means that you don't leave any kind of jealousy, resentment, or humiliation unchecked, because your enemy, you can think of it like it's like a fire, right? And then you thought that you've already put out the fire and it's just a flame, and you think that you could walk away, but no, you have to put out every bit of the fire and every bit of the flame, because the flame can always grow back to a fire. So never ever leave any shred of enemy grow unchecked. And enemy could also just be feelings, emotions, jealousy, resentment, and humiliation. So because power resolves threats early and quietly. Law number 16, use absence to increase value. So you have to think that your presence is a hot commodity, and not everyone can have access to you. So your presence, your energy is really exclusive, and you want to present like this value of scarcity and not being too available. So you don't ever over appear. So when it comes to events, you want to be the last one to arrive and the first one to leave. So because that shows that you have a lot of value in your presence, and you don't want to be the last one to leave, because the last one to leave always have the least power. Never overshare and never chase, of course. So scarcity creates gravity, which then creates exclusivity. And sometimes you want to disappear strategically. It depends on the power landscape, but sometimes disappearing strategically works a lot as a tactic move. Law number 17, cultivate unpredictability. If they can predict you, they can control you. So unpredictability has a lot of leverage. Mystery, unpredictability has a lot of leverage in almost all situations, all professional and social situations, because no one can manipulate you and no one can actually know what your next move is. When you're predictable, people know how you make decisions, how you think, and it's so predictable what your next move and your next decision is, and that's when they can control you. So when they can predict you, they can control you. So in order to have a shield on that, you always want to cultivate unpredictability. Law number 18, do not build fortresses, because isolation is dangerous. So it doesn't matter which country you're in, like I know that some countries, like it's harder to integrate into the culture. I'm just going to name a few countries like where people have actually moved there as an expatriate, and they feel really isolated because they can't really make any local friends. So maybe I've heard from my friends and acquaintances, like places like Poland and Germany. You can share with me like a few countries that you know down below, if your country or a country that you've been to and you felt really isolated because you can't make any local friends. But do you know that isolation is very dangerous? Because that shows that firstly, you don't have a support system. And secondly, it shows that you're very vulnerable. So anyone who wants to take advantage of you, you just don't have any connections or support system to fall back on. And so for those countries, like I know there is a struggle, especially in Poland and Germany. But for those countries, what you want to do is that you're kind of like in the middle, like you can't really fit into that country, but at the same time, like where you came from, you also like you're just way too broad-minded than where you came from, right? And I'm not just talking about being in Western or Asian societies. I'm just saying that because you are so globalized and you're so well-traveled that you don't really get to fit back where you came from, but at the same time, like because the people like in the next country, they are not as well-traveled or globalized as well, so you can't fit in, or maybe their culture is just so conservative. So you're kind of in the middle, but I don't see that like being a weakness. I actually see that as a strength, because firstly, you're different, and secondly, you get the best out of both worlds, right? You get the best out of both cultures. So what you want to do here is to find people who are very similar to you so that you don't feel isolated. So people who are just like you, who are just as broad-minded, who are just as well-traveled, who has lived in different countries, who are expatriates as well, perhaps, and so that you don't feel isolated. And they also have this shared sense of like they understand that it's hard to fit into the culture of that new country. So then you have this community here that you can actually have a support system and fall back on. So my point is that isolation is very dangerous. So it doesn't matter which country you're in. Well, obviously for the warmer culture, countries like France and Spain, you know, it's so easy to make local friends there. But I think that especially in Southern Europe, you know, where the culture is more tight-knit, is warmer, I think that it feels less isolating. But then for the more like Central European countries, more Germanic culture, maybe even Nordic Scandinavian culture, it might be a little harder to break in. Not that it's impossible, but it takes time, and also you have to learn the culture and the language. So it's always important for you to have like connections anywhere, any country, any city you go. Like even if you just have one friend per country in Europe or Asia or Latin America, North America, like never ever be isolated, because that completely just deprives you of your power. So never cut yourself off emotionally and socially. Law number 19 is to know who you're dealing with. So never talk to a billionaire like he's a middle-class manager, for example, right? So know who you're dealing with, in the sense that know how much power they have. And don't ever underestimate someone's power, even though some of them humble themselves, right? Like you see some billionaires and multimillionaires, they just wear hoodie and sneakers because they don't want people to know who they are dealing with. But that's why it's so important for you to uncover that facade of that hoodie and sneakers, for example, to uncover someone's facade and to know who you're actually dealing with. How much power do they have, and how connected they are? Who are they connected with? And also to know who you're dealing with, it's also because it's faster for you to build trust and rapport when you know what their self-interests are. So research like your so-called your target, like what their self-interests are, what are their passions, what are they passionate about, what's considered high value to them. Some of them, they don't care about money anymore. Some of them, they just care about health. Then talk about like ways to extend longevity, talk about health, like talk about like lifestyle, like healthy lifestyle, health, like. So it's so important to know who you're dealing with in order to win the game. So different, well, and also to know about different cultures and subcultures, it's also part of knowing who you're dealing with. So law number 20, do not commit to anyone. And I want to extend this, do not commit to anyone, anything, or anywhere. So when you cut off your options, you lose your power. So don't commit to anyone, so that you always have many options, whether it comes in terms of people, whether it comes in terms of industries or niche. You don't commit to anything. You always keep your options open, and that always puts you in a position of power, because you can walk away anytime. And don't commit to any country or any city, but actually don't commit to any country, because some countries, they used to be like the creme de la creme of the world, maybe 10 to 20 years ago, and are actually going downhill right now, right? And a few of them that might come to mind, like you could add on in the comments below. I would say like UK, the United States, and Canada, and Australia. They used to be like the place where everyone wants to be in, like the American dream, right? Like everyone wanted to immigrate there. These 4 countries specifically: USA, Canada, Australia, and the UK. But look where they are headed to now. I mean, realistically, they are really like, they are growing. They aren't going. They definitely are going downhill, and you're actually paying five-star prices for 3-star value, right? So this is why I actually said this saying about, when you're late to a park, P-U-C-K, when you're late to the park, you're late to the game. So you don't want to be like the laggard, where like after everyone have moved to that country, and then when it's going down here, and then you decide like, hey, yeah, that's a high value country that I want to move to. Like, no, you want to be like where no one really knows, like where it's going uphill next. It's kind of like betting on stocks, right? Like, so those 4 countries that I mentioned, they are very much mature economies, and right now, like the stock ticker of those countries, so-called, is going down, and you want to bet on countries that are like coming up soon, right? And I don't know, like perhaps you could just input like, which countries do you think are actually up and coming next that no one really knows yet or talks about. So I have a few in Eastern Europe, like for example, Bulgaria, like it's going to be up and coming. Poland as well, very much up and coming. So these are the countries whereby, like, people don't know the hype yet compared to the United States, Canada, or the UK, but they are actually going to come up like in the next 5 to 10 years. And usually these are countries that are emerging economies. So you don't want to commit to any country, because being committed to one country actually traps you when it goes downhill. So you want to have multiple options. Well, ideally you want to have multiple passports and residences, but then if not, you want to have multiple options and be very versatile, not to commit to any country, so that you're able to move anytime to anywhere. So that's, do not commit to anyone, anything, or anywhere, because that makes you lose your power. So you want to always have your power by keeping all your options open and stay sovereign. So law 21, play a sucker to catch a sucker. Well, obviously, I've spoken about this. To not show someone that you're smarter than them, or perhaps just as smart as them. So do you know that when someone underestimates you, it actually puts a lot of power in your hands? So it's great when someone underestimates you. In fact, do you know that how Kim Kardashian becomes a billionaire today? Like, it's because she said that because everyone underestimated her. And that's why she used that to her leverage and to her advantage to be able to be where she is today in terms of business. So play a sucker to catch a sucker. So let people underestimate you and never reveal your ambition and your strategy unless that benefits you. So because elite power hides in plain sight. So on one hand, you want to use selective honesty, but on the other hand, you want to play a sucker to catch a sucker. So you want to kind of downplay, like you want to downplay how smart you are. It depends on the situation, but sometimes you want to downplay how smart you are, so in order to catch a sucker, which is your target. So law 22, use the surrender tactic. So using the surrender tactic means that sometimes losing earns access. Yes, that's true, because retreat builds trust and ego actually blocks doors. So sometimes you surrender momentarily. It's kind of like in a chess game, it's like going back one step in order to take 2 steps ahead. So that's what the surrender tactic is actually about. It's because you want to give your opponent this sense that he or she is winning just momentarily, so that it actually catches them off guard, and that's when you strike. So use the surrender tactic in order to gain something. Because elite networking, they actually reward humility sometimes in the right situations when it's used strategically. And law 23, concentrate your forces. So one powerful relationship actually beats 100 weak ones. So you want to concentrate your forces in the sense that you want to go for quality over quantity. What's the point of knowing like 100 people who can't help you, and then rather than maybe knowing 2 or 3 really powerful connections that you can call anytime and that person is willing and has the ability to help you? So I've spoken about how elite networking actually grows vertically, where you want to climb up the power ladder instead of like horizontally, right? I spoke about having this misconception of moving countries in order to gain power. Yes, in a certain extent, it's true, because you gain power by being different. But then when it comes to network, you don't always have to move countries. All you have to do is to grow your network vertically, where it ascends in terms of power and not laterally. Law 24, play the perfect courtier. So what does that mean? That means that you do it with grace, you do it with discretion, and you do it with a lot of emotional regulation, because networking is also about emotional choreography. So playing the perfect courtier is someone who is very much like very graceful, and despite all kinds of situations, whether you're being yelled at, like no matter like what happens in the room, you just have like that very unshakable confidence inside, but on the outside you're just extremely calm and graceful no matter when someone yells at you. So that's about playing the perfect courtier. It's about kind of like waltzing yourself through different kinds of scenarios but still being able to keep your grace. Law number 25 is recreating yourself. So I spoke about being different by moving to different countries and having an understanding of different cultures. So how do you actually recreate yourself? You recreate yourself to an identity where no one is actually able to pin down, and also no one's able to stereotype you, so they can't predict you, and so they are unable to manipulate you. And you want to create yourself an identity that is so unique that it holds a lot of power, because then people are drawn to you because you're different. When you step into a room, they can't fit you into any box or any bucket of their beliefs or their imagination. And that is when you actually have a lot of power, because then people want to get to know you, people are drawn to you, and that's when you become really attractive, not just physically but also mentally, of your consciousness of who you're actually becoming as an identity. So law number 26 is keep your hands clean. So never be seen as the villain. A lot of times in the power landscape, people love to use pawns, PAWNs. They love to use pawns because they want to keep their hands clean. So power uses proxies. To me, that's just a pawn. Distance. You can do things from a distance. You don't have to be there. And plausible deniability. So plausible deniability, because that actually covers yourself and it keeps your hands really clean. So social survival means moral camouflage. And that's law 26, keeping your hands clean. Law 27, play on people's need to believe. So certainty attracts followers, and calm conviction creates gravity. So when someone has a need to believe in something, because that is kind of like their weakness, like okay, do you know how society actually plays upon this weakness of like creating this whole fairy tale on, say, I'm just gonna use which example should I use? Okay, so I'm just gonna use marriage as an example. So do you know how society actually creates like this fairy tale around it? Because they play on people's need to believe in this like ultimate, ethereal, idealistic fairy tale, and then they use it as a thumbscrew to manipulate you in order to, let's say, I don't know, to sell something, to get what they want. And so this law goes both ways. You have to be defended on yourself when someone tries to manipulate you to play on your need to believe in something that doesn't really exist. And on the flip side, when it comes to you using this law, you have to play on people's need to believe in something. So certainty attracts followers, and when you know what is considered high value to them, that's when you are actually able to play on someone's need to believe, because when they believe, then they're going to take action that's most likely in the direction of what you want them to do. So that's how you play on people's need to believe. And talking about like that whole fairy tale idea, I just want to add on that I just find that some people, I don't want to say everyone, like some people, they are still pressing on that people's weak point of the need to believe about marriage being a fairy tale, and then they're selling like all these dating courses about like getting the ring. I mean, please, the ring is just something for show, okay? Like the real, like it's just a business contract. The real thing's about negotiating your prenups. That's the real thing. Like can people who are selling dating courses, can you guys like stop pressing on this need, especially you are actually exploiting women's weaknesses. And I see like most of these people who sell these dating courses, they are women themselves. Like, can you stop? Like you are a woman yourself, and you are actually pressing on what society has actually conditioned women in order to keep them suppressed and under control, and you are still pressing that same button in order to cash out on it. Like you really have to think about what you're doing there. Like, you have to be more realistic. Like that's why I come back to this law. Play on people's need to believe. Yes, play on people's need to believe. But at the same time, it's too much of a far-fetched imagination and fantasy that you're selling, and you have to be more realistic. Like if marriage is like a business contract where you negotiate based on power on your prenups, where you negotiate the terms of a contract based on power, actually everything, like I say, everything, I don't care if it's business, social, or marriage, everything is still based on power. That's the truth. And that's what a lot of dating coaches, they don't tell women that that is the truth, because they still want to play on people's fantasy. So I don't really have much to say on that, and I'm not going to mention any names here. So law 28 is enter action with bonus. So hesitation looks like weakness. Okay, so entering action with bonus, obviously that shows that you have confidence, and that shows that this person is not intimidated easily or is being manipulated easily. And confidence is actually a social currency. So you want to enter every action with bonus. There's no second guessing, and there is just no doubts on anything that you do once you have taken the time to decide on it. Law 29 is play all the way to the end. So, sorry, plan all the way to the end. Plan all the way to the end in the sense that you have to have a very solid plan. I don't believe in having plan Bs or plan Cs, because then it gives your subconscious this reason to not go all in on plan A. So I always believe in doing plan A so well that you have no choice but to succeed, and you can't afford to fail. You have to succeed on plan A, and that's how you always get to your end goal. So plan all the way to the end. Have a solid plan, and then plan all the way from the start to the end, because you play the long game, right? Especially when it comes to connections and relationships, you play the long game and relationships compound. So that's how you plan all the way to the end. And the last law that I'm going to talk about for today is make it look effortless. So what does it mean by making it look effortless? Is that you don't want to show that you worked really hard for it, or because struggle actually lowers status. Like the fact that you have to put so much effort just to attain something actually shows that you lost your power. Because if you really had power, you can just do it with a click of your fingers, right? So you want to make it look effortless, and ease actually raises your status. So the easier it looks, right? You just have to make it look, the easier it's perceived to someone, that it looks very easy to attain, that you actually attain that goal very easily, the more power you have. So, and then because then that actually breeds curiosity, and then they'll be drawn to you, and they want to know, like, hey, what's your secret sauce that, that, because you make it look so easy and so effortless, and that's when you have power. So I've spoken from law 11 to law 30 today in part 2 of today's video on how to use the 48 laws of power to gain access to the ultra rich. So in my next one, I'm going to continue on from law 31. And also, I want to share about my offers, which I have on Elevating Circles, on how you could get access to the ultra rich. So it doesn't matter for what purpose you have, whether you just want to expand your friendships to more powerful connections, whether you are doing high ticket sales and you want to look for high net worth clients, or lastly, simply because you want to access the ultra rich so that you're able to expand your dating options to meet more high value partners. You can actually check out Elevating Circles down below. And then I also have and that one goes at 1,222 euros. And I have the second offer, which is a quantum cheat code. This is very much based on my experience and my knowledge of speaking with the top 0.1% all across the globe. And they all concede on one thing, that energy comes first before matter. So that is where I put all the quantum leap secrets that I've learned through them in order to quantum leap your reality. And yeah, that is a quantum cheat code. There is a technique in how you can actually shift your 3D reality based on energy manipulation, energy management. That's all in quantum cheat code, and that goes for 777 euros. And also, I have started my Substack, where I write stories that's inspired on my real life experiences on dealing with the ultra wealthy. So if you're interested in that, you can check it out in the link below. Most of it, I'm writing stories, but the purpose of writing stories is firstly for energetic activation, And secondly, it's also to share certain concepts about psychology and how to play the power game in the ultra-rich landscape. So there are a lot of hidden concepts in those stories. I would actually outline it in certain articles and tips, other than just writing stories that preserve these concepts. But I will also be doing some articles and tips and strategies on that, on how these stories actually underline this concept. So check out my Substack below, and that's all for today. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.